welcome you to this meeting. On behalf of FAO, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this first webinar on the CADRI Partnership Digital Tool. Given the magnitude and frequency of disasters in our region, this webinar could not have come at a better time. The nature of risk is changing, and we need to build systems to deal with multiple hazards and systemic risk to better understand the interaction between different hazards and preventing cascading impact. Our region was already severely affected by droughts, floods, storms, as well as transboundary pests and diseases, all compounded by climate change. The disruptions brought by the COVID-19 pandemic on our lives, health systems, industries, and livelihoods is a wake-up call on the need to review our approach to capacity development in disaster risk reduction. Our Africa Union Agenda 2063, which is the overarching framework for Africa's development, Africa's blueprint for inclusive and sustainable development cannot be achieved without significant investment in building stronger systems to protect economies and people's livelihoods from disaster and climate change impact. The Committee of Ministers responsible for disaster risk management of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, are currently reviewing their policy, strategies, and legislation to improve risk management practices. It is in this context that our 20 CADRI partner agencies joined forces to develop a digital tool to strengthen our service offer to countries in disaster risk reduction. The CADRI Partnership approach is in full alignment with the vision promoted by the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. It's about risk-informed country-driven. It's a risk-informed country-driven development agenda, participative and inclusive process. It's improving government UN system coordination and collaboration in development and programming and planning. Before I hand over to my colleague, Dr. Charles Quenin, I would like to reaffirm FAO's commitment to continue to co-host the CADRI Partnership regional facilitation on the African continent. Together with the IOM and UNFPA, FAO will be happy to continue to support this very important initiative. Thank you for your attention and wishing you good deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your welcoming remarks. I would like to now hand over to indeed IOM Regional Director.
Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me, please?
Very well.
Yeah, good morning, Sophie and colleagues, and my colleague, Louis, the head of resilience of FAO in the Southern Africa region, and to you, Sophie, the coordinator of CADRI Partnership in Geneva. All the colleagues are online from various UN sister agencies, from the various agencies working in the SADC region, participants from international NGOs, the Red Cross movement, donor representatives. Good morning. It's indeed a great pleasure to be having this conversation with you, and it's really a great pleasure for me to make a few opening remarks. My name is Charles Quenin, the IOM Regional Director for Southern Africa region, based in Pretoria, South Africa. Colleagues, this meeting, as already alluded to by my colleague from FAO, couldn't have come at a better time, especially in light of the surge of the corona pandemic, where governments are having to take various measures to contain it. Damages and losses from disasters are on the rise, as we can see from various countries in the region. And apart from the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 was dominated by climate-related disasters. These were largely responsible for about an estimated 389 recorded events, which resulted in about over 15,000 deaths, over 98.4 million people affected, and economic losses estimated to be about over 170 billion, which is quite significant. And the South Africa region is quite vulnerable to natural and human-made hazards such as drought, tropical cyclones, floods, storms, pest infections, and man-made and ecological disasters, such as the oil spill in Mauritius. We've witnessed the cyclone Ida and cyclone Kenneth, which significantly affected Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and to some extent Malawi. We also recognize Eloise recently, and also what is going on in Cabo Delgado that we as regional directors have had to mobilize our regional assets to support the member states and governments. Disasters, as we all know, are exacerbated by climate change and are increasing in frequency and intensity, significantly impeding progress towards achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, in Africa, we also recognize the achievement of the AU Agenda 2063. Disasters do not fit neatly in a single sector, whether be it agriculture, health, urban planning, or anything in between. But recent events have also shown that while governments and communities are responding to one event after another, maybe we may not just be around the corner yet. A good example is the desert locust invasion recently, which affected Ethiopia and other countries, as well as the flooding and COVID-19 pandemic, which had simultaneously struck Southern Africa in 2020 in particular. So we are dealing with multiple crises, multiple disasters, both human-made and natural disasters. So it is, and existing data also shows that an average of more than 22 million people are newly displaced by disasters every year, and 5.1 million people are in prolonged, protracted displacement connected to disasters. So in other words, disasters have become a leading cause of forced displacement, with over 6 million people displaced in 2019 in the Southern Africa region. And IOM, we have been doing the disaster displacement tracking matrix in many countries, including the DRC and in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, to provide at least reliable and estimated figures for budgeting and planning purposes for distribution of humanitarian assistance to the affected communities. So it is indeed possible to reduce disaster risk and mitigate the impact of disasters on people's lives through land use planning, ecosystems management, improved hygiene, and sanitation, as well as safe building codes. Because in many countries in Africa, we don't comply with building codes. We build in waterways, we build in areas which are designated for other land uses. And in terms of heavy rainfalls, we see the impact where many areas are flooded with disastrous consequences. We must therefore work together as humanitarian agencies and development agencies and on climate and environmental practitioners outside of our comfort zones, collaborating in many ways with coherent risk management frameworks that makes this possible. So in this regard, I really want to, on behalf of IOM, to appreciate the IOM and CADRI Partnership engagement, because CADRI offers capacity development services on a wide range of socioeconomic sectors, including agriculture, food security, health, nutrition, wealth, and many others, environment, infrastructure, and many. And as the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, in 2020, on the State of Climate Services report, shows that many nations lack early warning systems, and the capacity as well as the financial investment, not flowing into areas where most investment is needed. The CADRI capacity diagnosis tool, now digitized, will therefore help countries assess their capacities for preparedness, response, and recovery, and prioritize capacity development measures in immediate, medium, and long term, considering the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we know, is on the surge, and we don't know what might happen. In South Africa, we are now we've moved from level 2 to level 3, and it is envisaged that perhaps sooner or later in the coming days, we might possibly move to another higher level 4 or we never know, depending on the level of surge, might potentially even move to level 5 if need be. So IOM reiterates its commitment, working with the CADRI Partnership, not only as the co-host agency in Southern Africa, but also as a global co-chair together with UNDP, and a firm believer of the CADRI approach and investment. And it's indeed this regard that we are very delighted that this webinar has been organized to familiarize the stakeholders on digital functionalities that will help customize the capacity diagnosis to the country context and the delivery of the CADRI services in a more user-friendly manner. We believe that 2020 COVID-19 crisis is a wake-up call that showcases the realities of unprecedented global systemic risk, like the climate crisis that affect everyone. It is a strong reminder of how risk overlap and exacerbate other risk, and that inequalities or inequities create vulnerability between countries, but also within countries and communities. And as we've realized, also has some transboundary effects. So, colleagues, it is indeed our pleasure to be having this, and I really want to thank all those who have made this possible. And what we would like to see as outcomes for this webinar is that we are hopeful that participants will be familiar with the revised CADRI digital tool, and also to provide some inputs on the tool and its functionalities, as well as the ability to use the tool when deployed on CADRI countries diagnosis and assessment for the long-term goal. And going forward, we also would expect that the second webinar, which is planned to take place, in the near future, on the practical use of the digital tool, and also expect the official launch of the tool, perhaps in October, November, depending on how things unfold, as well as the rollout of the regional capacity building workshop, which was envisaged in 2020. So with these few remarks, colleagues, I would like to thank all of you for your active participation in this webinar, and wish you all the best and a fruitful deliberation. Have a good day, and TGIF, as we usually say, thank God it's Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your inspiring remarks. I think it's really perfectly set the stage, and thank you for being with us. And thank you also FAO, IOM, UNFPA for your trust in the partnership and what it can deliver in response to country demand. I think we are going to jump right into the presentation and really discuss this famous tool now. We're really very excited to introduce it to you. So in terms of our agenda today, we will have a rapid overview of the CADRI partnership for those of you who do not know CADRI, but I think this is going to be super fast now because we have limited time. And then introduce to you the rationale, the applications of the tool, have a little quiz to see if you pay attention, and then explore the digital functionalities and to what extent we've been able to actually exploit the potential of digitalization and leverage it. So I think now I would like to hand over to my colleague who is going to introduce to you a bit the CADRI partnership, because I have done this presentation too often, and I think now I want to hand over to the CADRI partner agencies to present CADRI. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Charles and Lewis, for those great introductory remarks, opening remarks, you may call them. We can move to the next slide, please. By introduction, I'm Michael Ebele, the Regional Humanitarian Advisor for UNFPA, and we're going to do the quick introduction of the partnership with my colleague Sina from FAO. So as you can see, the partnership is there. Again, like-minded agencies coming together, humanitarian and development actors. We could move to the next slide, please. Yeah, and again, there you can see the we have the executive partners, the technical partners, and advisory partners. And this is not conclusive. So if you do not see your agency here, it does not mean that you cannot be part of the partnership. So how did it all start? So CADRI started. It's basically a club of like-minded partners who wanted to build a facility to capitalize on the complementarity of specialized agencies' expertise to provide countries with a unique mechanism to mobilize and pool expertise to reduce disaster and climate risks across the socioeconomic sectors. And again, the added value of the CADRI partnership here is that different agencies bring in, the complementarity of the sectoral mandates of the agencies. When they come together, then you have really a pool of expertise that countries can tap into. So again, you can see, so it's a wall of system expertise that moves to deploy to countries to support countries, to do a capacity diagnosis, but also, build a capacity for disaster risk reduction. And maybe I'll welcome Sina to take over from here. Sina?
Thank you, Charles. From our side, Dr. Kresha Masuk is going to make the presentation. Kresha, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sina. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone online. My name is Kuresha. I am the early morning specialist. I'm just taking over from Sina for a few slides. So as Michael mentioned before me, the CADRI Partnership capitalizes on the expertise of each of the specialized agencies. Sorry, I'm just trying to move my slide. It is indeed a very bold ambition linked to the SG reform agenda and the humanitarian development nexus under the new joint program for the period 2019 to 2023. CADRI partner agencies have worked jointly to improve the offer of services to countries. This was done in particular through revising our common diagnosis and planning tools to expand their scope to include obviously leaving no one behind at the center of programming, integrating conservation, CC and DRR, mainstreaming conflict sensitivity in DRR and CCA to advance the HDNP, the hazard building systems to understand the linkages between hazards and multidimensional risk. Obviously, the modus operandi of the CADRI partnership is not to duplicate coordination mechanisms, but rather to integrate into existing regional coordination mechanisms, such as the Regional Interagency Standing Committee or the RIASCO in Southern Africa. And if you look closely in Southern Africa, CADRI is hosted or co-hosted by the FAO and the IOM. Quickly touching on CADRI engagement in the Eastern and Southern Africa region to date, as you can see, there are three different categories. Countries in blue, if you see Botswana, Eswatini, and Lesotho have received past support from the CADRI partnership. Currently ongoing, we have the Comoros and Mauritius, and in the pipeline, hopefully for this year, Kenya, Madagascar, and Zambia. And on that note, I will hand over to Sophie to complete the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues from UNFPA and FAO for introducing CADRI to you. So now we really want to get into the heart of the matter, the tool revision, the rationale for this tool revision. So this offer, this methodological offer to countries, it has been tested in about more than 30 countries, I think 35 countries. But it was felt that we needed to change. I mean, it had been developed about a decade ago, and then revised once, developed further in 2014 to cover a number of sectors. So the initial intention was really to bring the humanitarian and development angle in a diagnosis and planning tool for government to use. It's government-led. It's never an external team of experts. It's always a mixed team under the leadership of the government, also with in-country stakeholders. It's a multi-hazard tool, and of course, the strength of this tool is the multi-sectoral approach, a multi-disciplinary approach. However, we of course we received a lot of feedback from government on the services. Also, we measured where it worked, where it had no impact, in which country it had really significant impact, and what we could really take as lessons was first that it was really one size fits all. And the offer was one size fits all. The methodological approach was one size fits all. And it was difficult to really adjust it, for instance, to the Asia Pacific context. It was difficult also to adjust it to fragile context. So there was certain context it would work well, but then we thought it was a bit too rigid. And it was totally, it was not gender blind, but compared to what we have today, where gender equity and leaving no one behind is at the center of this approach. And it's at that time we could say it was a gender blind and not necessarily very flexible. So we have embarked on revision the whole of last year, all the CADRI partners, and basically we've reviewed all the sector tools, agriculture, cultural heritage by UNESCO. UNICEF was piloting 3 tools: education, nutrition, and WASH. Of course, WHO, the health sector, IOM, UN mobility, and UNOPS, UN Habitat, the infrastructure tool. And then UNFPA and IFRC have led the integration of the Leaving No One Behind agenda in those modules, in those different modules. So it has been a massive revision, also to integrate climate change. So the tool now is really to look at how to strengthen country systems at national and local level from the climate and disaster risk reduction angle. It's multi-hazard, but it's also possible to actually, that's why you can customize it to make it hazard specific. So it can be a tool to enable governments to look specifically at what system strengthening are required for drought risk management, or for avalanche, or for whatever, for thunderstorm. So that's the ambition. Also, is to be multi-hazard, but also to enable the government to get specific advisory support on certain hazards. And the conflict sensitivity elements have been integrated very deliberately. I mean, it's really a conflict sensitive tool. So this is how we have revised the modules throughout 2020. And you see it's really a very strong effort of the UN and IFRC system working together. Moving on to the next slide. Now, in terms of the digitalization, why going digital? I think that's what we want to really show to you today. First, it's basically to be able to customize. To really select fields and themes that are really relevant to the country context, select specific hazards, specific vulnerabilities, etc. It's also quality assurance. We use digitalization to actually ensure that the key principles like leaving no one behind and conflict sensitivities are integrated in the planning process that is being supported by CADRI. It also enables really nice visualization, which we cannot show you today yet. We are going to focus more on the customization and quality assurance today. And then it's also about participative planning. Because it's digital, it will really enable us to make the planning of investment in disaster risk reduction much more inclusive. It can, we can really actually expand the consultation process on key priorities for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation with the potential of digitalization. And finally, it's also a facility, a digital facility to enable periodic updates. So the government can use the tool without CADRI Partners support. It's totally possible for a government to actually use and adapt the digital functionalities for their own use without CADRI Partnership expertise. It's possible, and then they can also regularly update their scoring, their findings. So it's a bit of a public domain tool in some ways. It's also possible for an agency like UNICEF, like UNFPA, or any agency, any CADRI partner agency, to actually run a sector-specific diagnosis, a climate-sensitive WASH sector diagnosis. So it really, the digitalization enables multiple use. And that's what we want to show you today. And of course, yes, obviously, it's also indeed particularly relevant in this post-COVID, in this COVID-19 period of where we have to also work much more to have like this kind of virtual or hybrid mission, partially virtual, partially in-person support mission. Yes, moving on. So yes, I'm going to, I think I touched on this as well. Yes, different type of mission. Let's move on because I would like, yes. And now I think I would like to hand over to my colleague, Ruben.
Sorry, I had to just stop sharing for a second because I had to unmute myself. Now I am online. Okay, sharing again. Yeah, thanks to all. Thanks, Sophie, and welcome and good morning to everybody. So I'm going to briefly just describe to you the main structure what we have done for the digitalization of the CADRI tool. As you know, what the tool is an instrument that supports this capacity diagnosis. What Sophie was describing, this multi-sectoral, multi-agency effort to assist countries and governments in building their capacities to deal with disaster and climate change challenges. So the main purpose was Sophie was mentioning was to guide assessors and planners. So to have like a common analytical frame, to have a common understanding and common base to start this process of capacity diagnosis. And of course, to assess this, the main purpose of the CADRI thing is to assess this, to diagnose the capacities they have, but most importantly, to use that as a reference to move forward and define a plan in action to address those challenges, to address those gaps, and of course, to improve the conditions. The idea is, as also Sophie was mentioning, that the users of the tool should be like government experts, the UN country team experts, all the people that participate and support countries, national societies, global, basically users at different levels with different levels of expertise, general expertise. You can see like we have a generic module looking at more comprehensive aspects, but also sector-specific areas like WASH, like nutrition and education, these specific areas. Different needs, as also Sophie was mentioning, is specific to the context needs. How can we address specific needs? How we can contextualize to those different needs that you have in different countries, different regions around the world. So we have like also looking at areas, if you want to look at DRR, disaster risk reduction and climate change, specifically at these two areas. Or we can also look at the disaster preparedness. So it's part of this disaster risk reduction, but if we want to focus on the preparedness capacities that the country has in understanding the risk and what are the capacities that we have to address, to respond to recovery from those potential impacts. Looking also at specifically at the climate change adaptation capacity elements. So these different needs, risk information, different needs, different context, different requirements. So the idea is that the tool could be should be flexible enough to meet the demands, the requirements of the different users that are going to participate in this process. As we were saying also before, like, yes, you have the capacity diagnosis, but the idea is not to stop there, but to move forward, to go into action, to really define, like, based on the recommendations that you find, you identify the gaps. These are my gaps. And then based on these gaps, you recommend how can I address these gaps? How can I solve these issues that I'm finding? So the idea is that based on this, then you can go into the planning process. No? You can prioritize recommendations, the issues you think you need to address, the recommendations, the main recommendations to address those issues, and then you move into the planning process. And the idea is that the tool also could help you in that process. So developing, depending on the context, the specific needs. So it's either developing the national disaster reduction strategy or integrating the climate change aspects or informed national contingency planning, or you're planning for that, or how can we identify entry points for risk reduction in national development plans. The idea is also that this should be linked to the more broader processes that are taking place at the national and regional level. So we have the joint UN program, no, the cooperation framework, this specific agreement that the government and the UN agencies sign to contribute to work on a specific issue at the country level. So how can these elements, the results of this diagnosis can fit, can serve, can contribute, can be used as inputs for these frameworks. Also, how to identify elements or areas where we can jointly look for funding opportunities or develop funding proposals. So that's the main purpose. So it's going from the capacity to the planning and to the action. No, that's the main part. The tools should support that process. The primary focus, whose capacities, we have been saying this before. So the primary focus is to look at the national, local, mainly public sector capacities to address DRR climate change challenges. Secondary focus is to look at other actors in this process, this private sector, civil society. As Sophie was also mentioning, the methodology of this process, the CADRI process, the CADRI Partnership, is inclusive and participative. So meaning in all the discussions, we want to bring all different actors from the different levels. No? But the main focus is, okay, how are we addressing these issues at the national, at the local government, the public sector, how is addressing these issues? But of course, as we can see, is the whole of society in capacity to reduce risk. How can we together, the actions of the different actors can come together to really reduce risk and address the main issues that we want to solve. If you were familiar with the CADRI methodology before, you knew that we had like four areas. So basically, the CADRI tool was built around the priorities for action that Sendai Hyogo framework, but basically the Sendai priorities for action. And in this process, we are also kind of looking at those priorities and defining like more specific capacities. So what are the capacities that we need to build in order to address these challenges? So we have like 5 capacities, we call capacity dimensions. And around these capacities, we are building the different modules that support the tool have been developed. So we have like the governance, we have the implementation capacity, the financing, the knowledge. We're going to not to explain more, let me tell these aspects, but these are the main areas you can see. So we have like capacity dimensions. So main aspect, governance is like a key aspect that we need to look at when we are trying to identify gaps, when we're trying to identify challenges to address disaster risk reduction issues, climate change issues, to the governance. But what elements we have within this governance? So we need to go a little bit further and describe, okay, what are the elements that we need to look at? So we are talking about in example in governance, legislation, policies, what are the roles and responsibilities, how are the funds, how are the financing mechanisms defined to enable the implementation of these strategies, not these policies that we are defining. And like that, then we have like the other 5 elements. So we have the implementation capacity, knowledge, technology, and equipment. The way you're going to see reflected this in the tool is that we call what we call the capacity dimensions. We are, for the time we are calling them like core aggregated questions. So these are the main issues that we want to look at. And then these are say split into other elements. So we call the capacity dimension elements. We're going to call them, like, for the time being, the first order questions, and then more detail goes to the second order questions. This is something that also we are trying to come up with, like, a more intuitive name, because we call it now core aggregated question, first order question. And that would be great if you have some suggestions to have how to describe these capacity dimensions, those capacity dimension elements. This is basically like a very general introduction to the tool, to the structure of the tool. We're going to see a little bit more in detail later. Bogdan is going to show us a little bit how the tool looks like and how we are using these different elements in the development of the application, the online application. Now I'm going to give the floor to, I think it's Carla, who is going to run like a short quiz. So also to see if we have understood what we have presented. So Carla.
Yes, good morning, colleagues. Also from my side, my name is Carla, and I'm going to quiz you now to test your knowledge on the CADRI Partnership and the tool that you have now gained after listening carefully to the presentation. So I'm going to launch a poll now, and I encourage you to all please answer the questions that will show up on your screen. The answers are anonymous, so don't be shy. And please let me know if you can all see the question, the first one that should come up now for everyone. I hope that you can all see it. The first question is a really simple one. How many organizations constitute the CADRI Partnership? So I hope that everyone will get this right. And I see that already people are answering. I'm still getting votes, so I'm going to wait a few more seconds. And yes, of course, it is 20 partners, as most of you answered correctly. And now I'm going to move on to the next question. The CADRI technical partners have a commitment to deploy expertise when required in response to a government or UN country team request. Is it true or false? I already have 20 votes. The rest of you can still answer. And yes, of course, this is true. Very good. I'm seeing that people are listening carefully, so I'm very happy. And moving on to the next question. The CADRI Partnership services can be directly mobilized by a UN country team without a government request. Is it true or false? So here we can actually see that people think that this is false, but actually it's true. So maybe if there are questions about that, we can talk about this, clarify this later. Moving on to the next question. So I think this one everyone will get right because it's about the East and South Africa region. Who are the CADRI host agencies in the East and South Africa region? And here multiple answers are possible.
Carla?
Yes?
Carla, we don't see the right question on the screen.
You don't see what...
No, we see another one. We see the CADRI digital tool will allow for more inclusive and participative prioritization of investment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, we can answer that one.
We can answer that one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, please answer that one.
Maybe share, I don't know if you should share the link to the other version, but maybe some people don't have access to.
Yes, I will also share the link to the whole quiz for those who may not be able to participate now. So the link to the whole quiz is also now in the meeting chat.
Carla, we move to the next question.
Yes. So I hope now you will be seeing the question. Yes, who are the CADRI host agencies in the East and South Africa region? I'm very glad to see that many of you are participating to this quiz, and I'm getting a lot of right answers. And now let's move on to the next question. The CADRI tool was revised to integrate leaving no one behind and conflict sensitivity principles. Is this true or false? And this is actually something very important. So I hope that every one of you gets this question right, because it's very important for the revision of the CADRI tool. And yes, I see 100% of right answers. Very good. So I'm moving on to the next question. Which of these report types that you're seeing now are supported by the CADRI digital tool? And here again, you can select all that apply. And yes, the next question is, how many countries received support from the CADRI Partnership in the East and South Africa region to date? And this is actually a quite tricky question, because you already saw the map in the PowerPoint presentation with the list of countries. But how many countries already received or are receiving ongoing support in the region? And I see that also a tricky question is not too difficult for you. You're actually getting a lot of right answers. So now I'm moving on to the very last question. The 5 CADRI executive partners have been invited to join Jeff Bezos in his first flight to space. True or false? And yes, it would be very cool if this would be the case, but unfortunately, the invitation, I guess it got lost in the mail, or I don't know, but yeah. Okay, I hope that you are now energized a bit and still have the capacity to listen further, because now I'm moving on to and give the floor to Bogdan, who's actually going to give you a teaser of how the tool is going to look like. So Bogdan, please.
Thank you, Kara.
And thank you for all participants to the quiz.
Hi everyone, I am Bogdan Spotaru, user interface designer. I have joined CADRI early this year and helped them in creating the tool. I'm now going to share my screen and give you a small teaser of the tool we are creating. I hope everyone can see my screen. So today I'm going to present you some key features of the tool we are developing. At this point, the tool have a functional interface, and we can show you some of the most important functionality that we will develop inside the tool. In the first part of my demo, I will present you the main core of the tool, which is the question bank. Here, all the questions displayed on different levels are stored in our tool. The question bank is a very flexible feature of the tool and can be customized in very different ways. Users and agencies can build a set of questions without creating a mission or inside a created mission. The question bank can be filtered by different tags like capacities, report types, modules, hazards, and principle. And of course, you can select more of these tags and build your set of questions. Let's select, for example, a capacity, for example, governance, and a principle. Let's select leave no one behind, for example. We will filter now the question. The question bank will filter the questions taking in consideration these tags we selected. It will display core aggregated question, first order question, and second order questions related to governance and leave no one behind. Let's do another example, for example, and select as capacity financing. And let's add the same, a principle like leave no one behind. The question bank will be filtered again, taking in consideration this time the financing capacity and leave no one behind principle. It will display the same first order question, second order question, and core aggregated questions related to financing and leave no one behind. In the second part of my demo, I will cover the process of planning a CADRI capacity diagnosis mission, customizing the capacity diagnosis based on a country context and interests.
Sorry, Bogdan?
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you go back, because I think people don't have enough. Can you go back? Okay. And just maybe for this one, because I think they cannot really see what is written. So just to give an example, we are in the generic tool. We are not in agriculture. We are not in mobility. We are in the generic tool. And we selected financing. And in the financing section, there are like, I don't know, I would say 250 different type of questions or indicators, or even more, I think. But here we have, we just give an example, but there are many, many, many more questions. But here, typically, we are looking at to what extent are financial services for disaster response and recovery available. So that's a generic one. And then this is when it becomes, we have selected two, leaving no one behind. So one is public resource allocation for response equitably distributed between affected provinces. That's really a key element to look at leaving no one behind in financing. Is it allocated based on humanitarian needs assessment? Is it calculated based on humanitarian assessment and population vulnerability profile in this area? Another example is, can the government contingency budget be used to compensate victims of disasters? For instance, rebuilding housing, repairing productive assets. And is the fund, this compensation fund, is it equally accessible to all population groups, including ethnic minorities? So I think here, yes, with the Zoom, we can see better. Sorry, I just interrupted you but there are hundreds of examples like that on financing relating to access to microcredit, access to risk transfer mechanism, etc., etc.
Yes, of course. So today is just a short teaser created just to give you an example of what the tool can do and how customers can it be. I will leave my screen to Zoom so anybody can follow better. And going to my second part of the demo, where I will cover, like I said, planning a CADRI capacity diagnosis mission, customizing the capacity diagnosis based on country context and interest. And the first step in the process of planning a capacity diagnosis is to create a mission. From our interface, we are going back to the mission section. On this section, the user can create a mission. First, he needs to select a mission type. We have 4 types of missions: scoping, capacity diagnosis, planning and prioritization, and monitoring. For example, let's create a capacity diagnosis mission type. Then the user will select a country. Let's select Kenya, for example. We can select a type of report that will be created at the end of the mission. We have different types of reports we can select. Let's select one of them, for example. We can add a date, and a title is generated automatically from the mission information. The next step will be to select modules. We have different types of modules, like generic, WASH, environment, agriculture, infrastructure. We can select one or more modules. Please select help. After, we can select some hazards. The same, we can select one or more hazards. Let's select storm, for example, wildland fire. Based on this selected option, in the backend of the tool, composed from the specific question filtered by this selection, a frame is automatically created. We are calling this a country analytical frame. The second step in the process of planning is to map and deploy a multidisciplinary team. From our interface, we are going to the mission details we just created. Here, after creating the mission, a user with a specific role can build and structure a team which will work together in the mission process. For each of the users selected, a role will be assigned depending on his main specialization. The next step in the process of planning will be to assign responsibilities to the team members. This will happen in the questions frame we initially created when we started the mission. Here, a set of questions grouped under a specific module and capacity can be assigned to one or more users. The third part of this demo is about conducting the capacity diagnosis. Going back to the mission page we created, at this step, inside the mission, all the team members have assigned to them a specific set of questions. Depending on their specialization, team members have options to refilter the set of questions assigned to them. So let's go to the set of questions which is assigned to each of the users. And for example, they can refilter their set of questions by using different modules or principles, for example. All the questions assigned to the user will be filtered again, taking in consideration the new tags we will add here. Next, I will present you the tool ability to monitor progress, compile the information gathered by the assessor, and build a final report. From our interface, if we go back to the mission we created, users can follow the progress of the data provided by each member. Going inside his assigned set of questions, each team member will insert data into his set of questions. For example, he can score question, he can add findings, hazards analysis, justification for the score, and recommendation. Going back to the mission page, the data gathered from all the users will be compiled into a final report. The final report will contain all the mission data inserted by the user, along with the diagrams that will be automatically created based on the score and user information. In the last part of my presentation, I will talk about building knowledge on sector expertise. From our interface, we are going into the users module. And in the section where we create a new user, for each of the user added inside the tool, a profile will be created. Information about his area of specialization will be stored. And this way, a global expertise database will be created inside the tool. This will facilitate the planning of future mission and will allow the tool user to find an expert easily. That's all I wanted to present you for today. It's just a short teaser of what the tool can do. It's still in development. So I hope you enjoy it. And now I will hand over to my colleagues and open a question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bogdan, for your hard work. It doesn't look like that, but it's unbelievable amount of work to get there. So thank you, and now Bogdan is totally part of the CADRI family, even if it was not his first field of expertise. I think now is so into disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So thank you, and maybe just 2 points on this. So as we didn't have time to go so much into the detail, but yes, CADRI is gathered 20 agencies, but we also very much depend on expertise outside of CADRI. For instance, UN Environment, who is not formally part of CADRI, we very much rely on the expertise we can mobilize from UN Environment, from UN Habitat as well. We have an agreement with the UN Environment OCHA Joint Environment Unit to mobilize expertise in environmental emergencies. We also have an agreement with OCHA to be able to access expertise from UNDAC, from also the EU civil protection mechanism. So it's much bigger than that. And this is why also we felt it would be useful to have this database of experts, including government experts. So that's also the idea, is to have this kind of interface database of expertise by language, by sector in risk reduction, which is of course also open to integrate government or expert also from regional economic commissions. So it goes way beyond, of course, the CADRI constituency. I will stop here, and I think this is, yes, where we would like to invite your question, any question you may have on the tool or the CADRI partnership. And again, this is just the first of the webinar, which is really an introduction, but our objective is to have a cycle of webinars, to actually have one specifically on nutrition and risk reduction, specifically on WASH, specifically on infrastructure, also to have one on how we can use the tool just to integrate leaving no one behind in your intervention. And again, the tool is open to any agency, to any government. It's really totally free.
We have a question.
Thank you.
Madlu?
No, thanks very much, and good morning, and thanks to the presenters. Just in terms of the last presentation, to what extent is there flexibility in relation to different countries? Because the way it was presented, it's almost like there is already a format and there are already set questions. But how does it take into account different circumstances, whether in terms of climate change in a particular area? And I work for UNHCR. So in a case where there's been an influx of people into another country, how specific could it then be in relation to that for, say, UNHCR? Over.
Okay, are there other questions? Or shall I take this one first?
I don't see any other questions, so maybe you can take this one, and then maybe other colleagues.
So let me put the camera on, sorry. So thank you, UNHCR, for this. Actually, the whole ambition of the tool is to be flexible and customizable. So I think your question is maybe showing us that we are failing to communicate that. So it's very good feedback on how we need to actually improve the marketing. So there are some set. I mean, if you want, it's a question bank or an indicator bank. So you may have, like, I don't know, 6,000 ways to look at risk reduction when you look at financing, at this, at that. If you really want, if the government is interested to look, okay, I would like to look at camp management and management of displacement. They can just use simply, I mean, they can simply use the human mobility module that was developed by IOM, but I think it was in consultation with many other agencies. And then decide, you can go deep down and say, okay, I want to look at camp management, or I want to look at this. There are many, many, many different ways to use the sorting menus, if you want. There is a word search, there are all kind of yeah, you can really play with the tool, and I think this is what we're really impatient to launch the tool, because you can immediately get access and then be able to play with it and see how it can help you. I mean, yeah, Have I answered your question?
Well, I mean, that helps because, I mean, one will then go into the tool when access is granted, if there's registration or anything like that to do, and then test it. And then, of course, I'm sure the things that you are speaking about, we can then look at, because we also touch, UNHCR also deals with internal displacement, and of course with IOM, we cooperate in many areas. So we'll see how it works. And if we must get in touch with our colleagues here in Pretoria, we will do that. No, thanks very much.
Yes, also something, of course, why we wanted to digitalize, maybe I did not touch on that, but we wanted it to be a living tool. It means that any expert deployed on a CADRI mission, government expert, EU expert, or CADRI partner expert, and is able to at the end is able to add a question to say, oh, you didn't think of this. So it's possible to say you have a function to say I add, and then at the end of the mission, the admin would there is an admin function to say, okay, do we approve this suggestion? So in the end, the tool will constantly be updated. It's super easy for any user of the tool to actually make recommendation, either to reformulate or to add, to say, and for instance, one area of the tool we still feel is really a bit weak is certain hazard, like avalanche. You know, I mean, we really don't have a lot of, advisory, let's say, points in the tool that relate to avalanche, what type of technology is required, what type of SOPs is required, etc. So we try to, this will grow, right? We will never have the perfect tool. So at one point in time, we always feel it's not complete enough, but our hope is that people like you, HCR, anybody, I mean, can really constantly improve, make suggestions so that it is a living tool. Thank you.
There is a question from Matthew.
Thanks. Yeah, Matthew McElvenna here. I'm Regional Emergency Advisor for WFP in Eastern Horn of Africa. Thanks for the presentation and the tool, which looks useful. I just wanted to touch on the multi-hazard aspects of it, and as WFP in this region, our overall operational portfolio is about $4 billion for Eastern Horn of Africa. And over 70% of that is driven by conflict and insecurity, which produces population displacement, internal displacement, and refugees. So that still forms the vast majority of what we do as a humanitarian agency, is responding to conflict. So to what extent is the tool designed to include conflict and insecurity as a hazard, or is it really primarily aimed at the natural disasters and the socioeconomic shocks, which are still relevant for us, but the socioeconomic shocks and natural disasters generate about between 20 and 30% of what we do as an agency in terms of our response in this region? Thanks.
Thank you so much, WFP. You know, it's really interesting because this point was really a major, not disagreement, but let's say a big issue of discussion between the CADRI partners and WFP and UNICEF in particular, were pushing to have multi-risk, I mean, to have something that would help us look at different type of hazard, including, as you say, potentially a conflict, social unrest, etc. And then, and then other partners were thinking, no, we can't, because we will lose we will really lose the focus. We will lose focus. And already, to develop a tool that looks both at disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, which are very close but not the same thing exactly, it was already a huge leap forward. I mean, it was already changing totally the tool in some ways. So no, it's not looking at conflict specifically. Like, you cannot have a look at what capacities are required to prevent or manage or respond to this type of conflict or this type of conflict. We don't have that. But the conflict sensitivity element we had is very strong. So it's really around natural resource governance. It's really around equity in access to equally distributed humanitarian assistance. There are many dimensions that relate to conflict prevention, but in relation to access to natural resource or this type of things that are impacted by climate change or by disasters. And that's, again, it was a very lengthy discussion between the CADRI partners. And it may evolve differently. You know, I mean, if the tool, it's always a bet, you know, I mean, some tools we invest a lot and then 5 years later they cease to exist. We are very conscious of that. So right now, the tool is really in support of Sendai and Paris Agreement, but it may evolve. And if it's successful, if there is really an uptake by you, the agencies, you find it a good reference by the government when they want to look at their own capacities, etc. It may evolve into something bigger, but at this stage, there's no conflict. Another question?
I think there's a comment, Sophie and Bogdan, here from Lisa. She mentions, probably it's a comment, I think in the chat box, I think it's important to recognize climate change, including natural disasters, drive conflict by only addressing conflict and not the drivers, including climate change and natural hazard, inadequate risk management. We will not be able to transform conflict into I think she stopped there. But I think it's a general comment and observation on addressing conflict, which I think you've alluded to. Yeah, okay.
Yes, there are a lot of elements of conflict prevention. I mean, you know, there are a lot, really. I mean, if you look, there is a lot. If you look at the tool, and when we'll have access, and we will have a special modules specifically on what does that mean operationalizing conflict sensitivity in DRR and climate change adaptation. So there is a lot about that. And also, I mean, also to come back to the point made by our WFP colleagues, there is also a very strong focus on preparedness in the tool, on crisis management, on displacement, management of displacement, etc. So any system, I mean, the system strengthening in terms of crisis preparedness and response would in any case be also very relevant for any type of of crisis. So I think the focus on preparedness, response, recovery is also useful for any type of crisis, yeah, including conflict, of course. There are no more questions in the chat or hand raised. Maybe I think we can, and thank you, Bogdan, again, and Ruben. Maybe we can go to the next slide on the next step. or even if there is no next slide immediately available, I can
see it? Sorry.
talk to it.
You didn't see it?
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry. I'm coming. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. So the first thing is
Can you see it now?
not yet, but I think it's coming. Yes. So this is really a teaser. We have a lot of still some work to do on uploading all the content and a lot of back coding. So it's really not ready yet. But our ambition is to work very hard on this over the summer and then to be able to welcome you to register. And we have all your email address to register this fall and be able to navigate the question bank, including all the sectoral modules. And then we also, of course, preparing a much more hands-on tutorial modules for the CADRI experts who will be registered and who would have an interest to be deployed on interagency capacity diagnosis mission, or I mean, there is much more in CADRI than capacity diagnosis, but it can be a prioritization planning, etc. But there will be tutorial for that. And as I was indicating, we will also have sector-specific modules webinar. So stay tuned. We're really happy to see the interest that is generated by this webinar. You can contact your regional host agencies. Michael, whom you saw, who was giving the first presentation for UNFPA in Eastern Africa. Sina and Andrew in Southern Africa for FAO and IOM. You reach out to them to have more information about the tools, the upcoming webinars, or any issue in relation to the CADRI Partnership country work. As mentioned, right now there is a discussion with Zambia, which is really well advanced, but it also depends on the election calendar. A discussion also with the government of Kenya, Madagascar as well. So stay tuned because we really look forward to see you applying the CADRI methodology and tools in response to this government request when we receive them. And I want to thank Arnold, who is our new regional facilitator for the region. I don't know, Arnold, if we can see you. And maybe we should have put your email address here. But welcome, Arnold. Arnold just joined the team to coordinate our support in the countries that are coming up: Zambia, Kenya, Madagascar, potentially Tanzania as well. So welcome, Arnold, and thank you all, and thank you very much, UNFPA, FAO, IOM, for hosting CADRI and for also helping with the organization of this webinar. And thank you, Ruben.
Thanks to all.
And we'll be sharing the link for this webinar. Thank you, and I think we're right on time. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and you have a better idea of the CADRI offer.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Bye, Sophie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.